Welcome to the Level Up Lifestyle, where we tell the real stories of people who overcame and elevated. In today's episode, Mike sits down with Regional Director Alfredo Gonzalez. We get to hear the story of his journey, from his family escaping war-torn El Salvador.
I was young enough to not remember.
Yeah.
She still remembers hearing the bombs exploding.
To hearing advice from his father that changed the trajectory of his life.
You're going to make something of yourself. He said, but that doesn't happen if you die in the pit today.
To cultivating his never-quit attitude for his career.
At the end of my career, when I retire, I want them to say, that's Alfredo Gonzalez. He's a Globe guy.
All of this coming up next on the Level Up Lifestyle.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Alfredo.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. Have a seat. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Level Up Lifestyle podcast. So excited to have everybody here. Alfredo, we got 115 people here for you.
All right.
Right? Here to hear your story. That's exciting. So for those of you, just real quick, that are listening, and you thought you heard some people in the background, we are here coming to you live in front of a live studio audience. We've got 115 people here for our Globe Life University 101 Academy.
Yeah.
And these are our newest leaders. We've got a lot of supervising agents here getting started. And what we like to do is bring them in. We do this, 4 or 5 times a year?
Yeah, definitely.
And just give them the skills and the encouragement to go back and build and grow their business and change lives and the people that they're leading and in the communities that they're serving. So it's exciting to have them here. And we thought, what better way to end their 3-day journey here in beautiful McKinney, Texas, than film a podcast in front of them, right? So how about
Great
that?
opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. So Alfredo, we're going to get into your story, but I think also first, just for the listeners to know, you are a senior director with Globe Life Liberty National.
Yes.
How long have you been with Globe Life and all?
So this year is 11 years for me.
11 years now, okay. How long with Liberty National specifically?
Almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years,
Yeah.
okay. And, we'll kind of get to the journey and how that goes. As a senior director, one of your responsibilities is these academies, right?
Yes.
And making sure that they're running from the 101 here, which is the newest leaders, all the way up basically until the agency owner bullpen, and getting them ready. And now you're taking on some more responsibility, just overseeing all of the leadership development. So
yeah, I'm excited about it.
Oh, I'm excited for you as well. It's going to be great. So that's kind of what you do here. But there was a journey to get to this stage, right?
Yes.
I think that journey really starts going back. Even it predates you. It goes to your parents back in El Salvador. So why don't you just take us down that path? Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you said, for me to tell my story, it starts with my parents.
Yeah.
Born in El Salvador. I was born in El Salvador as well. And during the time when I was born, El Salvador was having a civil war. And so it was war torn. And so, I'm telling you, it goes back to my parents and my dad, he was.
So he's born in El Salvador.
He was born in El Salvador. He got raised. He had to drop out of school when he was in 3rd grade.
Really?
To start helping provide for the family. So, it was just.
So that was like a decision, like your grandparents then said, hey, gotta make ends meet?
He was raised by his grandparents.
Gotcha.
And he said he came home one day and they were like, hey, listen, I know that school's important, but you got to help provide for the family. So, you're done with school.
Wow.
So he picked up a sickle and worked in the fields, cutting whatever the product was, hay, bahia, whatever it was. And
3rd grade. So what is that, like 8 or 9?
Yeah.
That's
making 5 cents a day.
This wasn't that long ago. You hear stories like that and you think, here in this country, that was, hundreds of years. No, this was like.
No, this, this
not a long time ago here.
Not a long time ago. Yeah. And so, so a lot of the lessons that I have come from my parents telling me, their experience growing up and how they were raised. And so being in that circumstance where I can't relate, having to drop out of school and start working at 8 years old. But he told me, he gave me a very important lesson about, the first time he bought shoes.
Okay.
And so for him, it came back to he had to save he had to save up to buy them. And so he would walk by the store and see him in the window.
On his way to work.
On his way to work or
he's 10.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Exactly. And he would set aside a penny when he could.
Wow.
It wasn't, every week, but it was when he could. And he said it took him 3 or 4 years to save up. And he finally bought his first pair of shoes when he was 13.
Wow.
And so before that, he didn't run around barefooted, for 13 years. The shoes that he wore were fashioned from old tires and string wrapped over his feet.
And so that's what he's wearing, working in a field,
yeah.
Right? Which is not great, for your for your feet and wearing old tires. So what did he buy? I guess shoes to work in, or
no? He bought a black pair of dress shoes.
Okay.
And I guess for him, dressing up, going to church on Sundays, that was a big deal. And he wanted to look nice. He wanted to dress up for when he went to church. And so he said he brought the shoes home and kept them in the box. He said he would put them on in his room and just kind of walk around, without trying not to crease them, trying not to get them scuffed or dirty. And then he would take them off and put them back in the box and then just, walk around barefooted. And then when he did go to church, he would carry the shoes with him and then slip them on when he got to church so that, he didn't want to scuff them. He didn't want to crease them. He wanted them to last because obviously it took him years to save up for it.
Pennies at a time.
So it was, pennies at a time, something to really cherish.
Wow.
That's
an amazing story. I may call you later when we're done and have you tell that to my kids because Brooklyn, like her biggest thing is like which Stanley matches her sweatshirt with her shoes, right? It really does put it in perspective, all seriousness though, right? I mean,
it does, yeah.
There's so much that we take for granted in this country and in our lives that, there's people that even in this generation are living in these moments. And so your dad at some point eventually, came to the decision that he got to do better for his family, right? So, so he grows up, and then what is he doing for work, kind of, before and after you're born?
Yeah. So as a laborer, growing up, the pinnacle for him would be to operate a machine, which in El Salvador, it's basically driving a tractor.
Okay.
So you go from, having a sickle in your hand to now you're driving a combine or a bigger machine. And same work, but just more efficient. You're not actually doing it by hand, you're driving. And so he actually accomplished that by the time he was 25.
Okay.
He worked on a couple of farms and, I guess worked his way up to being able to.
It's almost like 20 years though, right? He starts when he's 8.
Yeah.
Now he's 25 and you make it to that point. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. And so for him, that was it. At 25 years old, he's now making the most money that he's ever going to make. And so my parents had my sister before me. She's 5 years older.
Okay.
And so they had her. And then with this civil war that's happening in El Salvador, they just came to the decision, once my mom got pregnant with me, that it wasn't a way of life for for the family that they wanted to raise.
I mean, do you think your dad was thinking about what he had to experience? And, I don't think it's any fault to his grandparents. They were doing what they had to do in the environment that they lived in. But I'm sure there's got to be some motivation of like, hey, I don't want to ask my kids you can't go to school. You got to go to work when you're in 3rd grade, wanting to not have that happen.
He wanted to provide us an opportunity to have a different life than what they had to that point.
Yeah.
And so, so my parents make that decision. And so my dad and his cousin decide we're going to America. Like we're pursuing the American dream. Like there's opportunity. Yeah. There's riches abound, right?
Sure.
That's the dream.
Right.
Coming to America. And so,
but at this time, so just there's a rampant war happening, right?
Yes.
This isn't kind of a little bit of conflict. I mean, this is a big civil war happening in El Salvador.
Yes, definitely. So my sister still tells the stories to this day. And thank goodness for me that I was young enough to not remember.
Yeah.
She still remembers hearing the bombs exploding in the evenings, and everyone in the house laying down on the ground. Everyone's shushing each other, being quiet, and she said she can still hear my uncle's voice saying, "Oh man, we're gonna die tonight. We're gonna die tonight," and that was repeated day in and day out.
So there's inner fighting, and you guys are just caught in the crossfire.
Yeah. They're just. My parents lived down one of the main roads, I guess if you can call it that. It really wasn't like a road like ours, but
dirt road.
It's a main thoroughfare for them to move up and down, and so they had military equipment moving down, and so there was guerrillas and then the Salvadorian military. And so, there was no predictability where the fight would break out.
Yeah. But this is 20th century warfare happening,
yes,
like outside the house.
Yes, definitely.
So not the best place to raise a family.
No.
Especially, I'm sure the economic condition is getting worse. And so your dad makes the decision, I can't let my family grow in this. But leaving the country probably had to be extremely challenging because of the socio-economical, political situation to even be able to get out. So, and this isn't a story about immigration whatever, but I mean, it is, I think what it is, it's a story about somebody wanting to do better for their family.
Definitely.
So what was that journey like for your dad?
Yeah. So at the time, he couldn't just go to get a passport and come here.
Probably no office open.
No, nobody's saying, okay, hey,
a tank parked out front.
Who's signing up? Who's signing up to go to America?
Yeah.
There was none of that. So they had to make a decision, and then they had somebody that basically it's like an underground railroad.
Yeah.
From El Salvador all the way to America, and
probably cost money.
Yeah. Yeah. So he had saved up for that, and he and his cousin, they started the journey. And so if you don't know where El Salvador is, it's south of Mexico, but there's another country between Mexico and El Salvador. It's Guatemala.
Okay.
So you cross the river into Guatemala, and then from Guatemala, you cross the river into Mexico. And then that starts the biggest part of the journey.
Right.
Because, we all know the map. You see how long Mexico is. And so that journey takes weeks.
And how are they doing that? Is it just on buses, hopping in the back of trucks, riding on trains, everything? Yeah, so the people that were bringing them have a network that they have set up, but there's times where it's just walking. You're on foot for a few days, and then you're going to the next stop. And there were a couple houses where my dad still remembers them feeding them. Wow.
And coincidentally, I met one of the ladies that fed my dad.
Really?
I met her. She had moved to the same town that we were in.
Really?
That I grew up in, yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so the journey continued, and they made it to the Mexico-U.S. border.
Okay.
And they had a plan. And, so for someone with a third grade education, my dad has well superseded that.
Yeah.
Just
life skills, right?
Life skills as an example. He's just a great leader, great person.
Yeah.
Very influential in my life.
Sure.
But they had the forethought that if they got separated, they each had a map that had a town in Texas circled. And I said, if we get separated, this is where we'll meet.
In the town.
In that town, in that town.
You'll find the town square and wait.
Yeah. And so they did get separated. And so my dad got lost. So he walked around the Texas Valley for 30 days.
Really?
Turned around, didn't know, disoriented. Yeah, he said he would. He said a lot of times he would pass.
What is he eating? Food and water? And
he's just whatever fruit
that he
can find. Living on people, the kindness of people. Handing them a taco or a burger or anything.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, but he said he would walk past immigration, and he was so turned around. He's actually walking towards the Mexican border. So they were like, "Well, we don't need to pick him up. He's on his way back home." So he's just lost. And finally, he found someone that told him, "Hey, I can get you to that little town you have circled."
Yeah.
And he said, "Okay, it's going to cost you $200." So for him, he doesn't have $200, but he says, "You got it." This is an opportunity to get me there. And he said, I've been lost for 30 days. I'm desperate. So yes, I will pay you once you drop me off. My cousin will have the money. And he said, so they brought him up through Houston all the way up to Henderson.
$200. This is what, early 80s probably?
Yeah,
right?
Early 80s.
You can talk about inflation, $200, it's probably $1,000 or $2 now.
So
right? That's a lot of money.
He was just thinking, oh my goodness, and he told me he would pray on the journey, he's praying that somehow the miracle happens and $200 comes available so that he can pay these people.
Wow.
Because he didn't know them.
Yeah.
He didn't know
what they're going to do.
Yeah. So he didn't know, if there would be dire consequences for not paying them. But, to this day, I don't really know how and why, but the miracle happened.
Really?
So they took him to the post office. That's where they dropped him off. And my dad's cousin was there.
At the post office?
He met him at the post office, and he had money with him.
Wow.
And so he paid the guys $200. He was like, man, I missed you. I'm glad you made it. So, and he told him, he put his arm around him and said, hey, I've got work lined up for us.
Wow. So this whole time your dad's lost, wandering. Yeah. His cousin had made it there.
Made it.
Found a place to live, found a place to work, all that.
Yes, had gotten settled. And so when my dad gets there, he said, yeah, I've got a place to work for us. And it happens to be a barbecue place.
Okay.
And so that begins, that next chapter for him. They start working. He's working.
He didn't have any experience in barbecue or
food or anything.
Not a lot of Texas barbecue in El Salvador during a Civil War.
And he's a tractor driver.
Now they're doing a brisket for 20 hours with tanks driving by or anything.
100%. No, none of that. But he had work ethic.
Yeah.
He always leaned on his work ethic. And so he started doing odd jobs at the factory and then kind of working his way up. And then after about 9 months of saving up money, he said, okay, I've got to go back and get my family. Okay. So that actually made the journey twice.
Wow. So he had to go back.
He went back.
Probably this, you're not just booking a flight, I would think, right?
No.
You got to go back the same way.
Yeah, the same way.
Yeah. So he comes back. You are now born?
I'm born, yeah.
Okay. You're how old?
I'm less than a year old.
Okay. And
so,
so what's that like? Now, it seems like this was a very challenging journey for him as a 25, 30-year-old.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine, doing it by yourself. I have a hard time when I'm just flying on a plane with my kids.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into that. I can't imagine having to go through this journey with children. So what was that like?
So he comes back. They make the decision that, hey, look, I've got money. I've got a little bit of money, not a lot, but a little bit of money. And in El Salvador, the money goes farther.
Right.
And so they make the decision, we're going to leave. They pick the date a couple weeks later, and they're heading back to America. And so the big debate was, do we bring Alfredo or do we leave him?
So they thought about leaving you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
did you ever bring that up later, around Christmas time? You're like, I would have gotten you, but no.
Yeah. Well, who makes that journey with a 1-year-old?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
With a baby. And so
that was
a lot of the process just being quiet. You're sneaking.
Right.
You're sneaking from one country to another at times.
The baby doesn't realize that.
Right. Yeah. The baby has needs.
Yeah.
So I understood. When they were telling me the story, I understood. But
I think that's another concept that is maybe just so foreign to people, having been raised in this country, and the old cliche, taking for granted all the the luxuries that we really do have. But you're a war-torn country, money's scarce, food's scarce, people trying to leave for a better life. This is actually, maybe kind of common that families end up leaving children behind with relatives.
Yeah. So I have, I've got cousins whose parents left them there.
Wow. That are still there?
Always with the best of intentions to go back and get them, but just never did.
Wow.
And so, the fact that my dad even came back, he very easily could have started another family here.
Yeah.
But he came back for us. And then when they had that discussion about leaving me, that's when my mom put her foot down. She said, no. She said, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving Alfredo.
Wow. And so pack up the bassinet and we're going.
Yeah. She told him, she said, hey, look, it's all of us or none of us.
Wow.
And so for me, I get choked up because
Sure.
I have all those cousins that my grandparents raised them. And by the time that their parents could actually afford to come get them, they didn't want to come back.
They don't want to risk it too. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah, they're like, well, this is what I know.
Yeah.
At that point, they're almost adults. And
I see. Like they're just going to stay. I mean,
this is our life. Like you're asking us to leave our life and come up there. Where as a kid, I didn't have any say in it. I didn't have a decision.
I'm sure you've thought about what your life would be like if they hadn't made that decision, if your mom hadn't put her foot down.
Drastically different.
Yeah.
There's no way it couldn't be significantly different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're one, so you probably don't remember the journey.
No.
But I'm sure you've been told. So what was that like?
Yeah, so they immediately begin the journey, crossing the rivers, get through Mexico, and make it all the way to the Mexico-U.S. border. So now they're weeks into this journey. And
Mexico has very strict immigration too. And I don't know a lot of people realize that.
They do.
They are very much like, even more strict than what you may think that
Definitely.
the United States is.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, for us that raised here, maybe I've got to ask you what country you're from.
Yeah.
But in Mexico, they can tell who's from El Salvador, who's from Guatemala, who's from Panama, Honduras, all the other countries, because we look a little bit different and we sound different. The way we speak Spanish is not the exact same. So
if, somebody from deep Alabama is in Minnesota, there's different accents a little bit.
Minnesota. Exactly. Same thing. And so we actually got caught.
Really?
At the Mexico-U.S. border. And so Mexican immigration is strict.
So you got caught by the Mexican immigration?
Yes.
Okay.
So I did spend time in Mexican jail.
Wow.
Yeah, as a baby.
So on your resume, right?
Yep. I don't remember it.
Rough life. 1-year-old already a convict.
I know. So every time I go to Mexico,
El Chapo
I'm like,
there,
I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. But as strict as they are, they don't worry about where you came from. They just worry about getting you out of their country. So they took us all the way back down and dumped us in Guatemala.
Wow.
And so
you said that's the longest part of the journey, right? And you're there and it's like, nope.
Yeah. Huge setback.
Yeah.
Huge setback. But then that night we crossed back into Mexico.
Wow.
And so there was they very easily could have said, man, we just made this journey. It's too tough. We're going back. Mm-hmm. And it's, a day's walk back to home.
Yeah.
But instead they crossed the river and said, we're going to America. And so they made the journey again and then get back to the Mexico-U.S. border. Mm-hmm. And, that there's that other moment where, this is the first time for my dad crossing the river into the U.S. with his loved ones.
Yeah.
And so at this point, he's carrying my sister because my sister was small, wiry. My mom carried me because she was determined to bring me along.
Yeah.
When I was born, I was over 10 pounds when I was born.
Wow.
And so,
never lived in the single digits.
Never seen single digits a day in my life. And, but she was determined. So she carried me. And so my dad picked up my sister and he said, I'll go first. And so he stepped into the river and immediately they were neck deep in water.
Wow.
And so he begins to panic and he's concerned about, should we do this? So he turns around and looks at my mom and says, we can't do this. I don't want, we're going to die here.
In the river.
And he said, look, the water.
How deep is the water? Is it, or did he happen to be in a?
I guess it just depends on where you're crossing. If it's shallow, because sometimes, a river looks like a large creek.
Yeah.
And then there's times where it's deep and rushing water. So, they wasn't sure. Mm. So he steps in and he's neck deep and he looks at my mom. He said, I'm not a strong swimmer. So if this is
going to carry this child,
if this is any deeper, we'll drown here. And she looks at him and says, take the next step.
Hmm. Wow.
So, and she said, we're going to America. and I would rather die in this river right here than to go back.
Wow.
So she told the, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, she told him to take the next step. And he did. And at that moment, he realized his first step, he had stepped in a hole.
Hmm.
And he was actually in 2 feet of water.
Wow.
Yeah, just couldn't see the bottom.
One step.
Almost
turned around.
Oh, he was ready to turn around.
Yeah, that's such a symbolic moment for many different things, right?
Definitely.
You're in that hole and you're one step away and all that. But I mean, and even your mom's statement, I'd rather die in the river than go back. That again, that just speaks to what the opportunity is in this country and how dire things were.
Yeah.
Living in a Civil War torn.
Yeah, we're not going back.
Yeah.
We're not going back. There's no quit.
Yeah. So we take the step.
So he takes the step, they cross, and then they always joke when they tell the story that I barely got my diaper wet. Coming across. And so then we made the journey back to Henderson, which is the town that they had circled.
Yeah.
All along. That's where I grew up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you grew up living in this country. And when did you know that this story had occurred for your family? When did, as a child, when did it start to hey, we had to work to be here and there was a journey?
Yeah. Dad would tell the story. And that's the thing about my dad. He cared about people.
Yeah.
He loved his family. Clearly, I mean, he went back for it, so he loves his family. But then he also kept bringing others over.
Hmm.
And so he would bring, my uncles arrived. My oldest brother arrived. So he kept bringing people over. And every time someone would show up, they would tell the story.
Yeah.
And the more I heard it, the more it really sank in what it took for them, what the sacrifice was for us to have the opportunity to be raised here.
How influential is that in how you approach things in your life here?
So for me, anytime I endure something that's tough or challenging, I always say I don't quit. I don't quit anything. And I always look back to them. Like if I need to draw on strength, I think back to what my parents did. They left a country where they knew everyone, everything, and the way of life. And they came to a country that didn't want them. They didn't know the language. They didn't know anyone. And they built a life for us.
Yeah.
And so I was like, if they can do that, I can get over this hurdle.
Yeah.
I can overcome anything.
Yeah.
So I don't quit.
Maybe the obstacles aren't as big as you might think they are.
Yeah.
If they went through that.
You just got to put it in perspective.
Absolutely. And I think over time, again, remember the time that this is all occurring. You talk about immigration and, everyone, has their thoughts in it. This isn't a political conversation, but,
right.
It would take years to be able to, if you could even file any documentation. I mean, there's no place to go in El Salvador.
No.
There's no way to, it's not the age of the internet. So, all this stuff is in person, paper, sign, mail, and all that. So once, and you can't wait because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what was that process of then becoming a citizen and being able to live in this country freely and be a U.S. citizen?
Yeah. So went to live here a few years and, working illegally, living here illegally. And then after a certain point, you can apply for your residency. And so they did that when I was a child. I remember being a little kid, maybe 6, 7 years old. Mm-hmm. Through that process. And then, then they became citizens. And so through that, because my mom became a citizen and I was underage, mm-hmm. I was automatically granted citizenship.
When did that occur?
I was 14.
14.
Yeah.
You become a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you?
It means everything to me.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, I was not an equal with the people I went to school with.
Mm.
There's always jokes. And obviously growing up in the South, there's insensitive jokes.
Yeah.
And things like that you endure. And I wasn't offended by it, but I was like, I'm not an equal with the people that are telling this joke.
Mm. So
they talk about talk about green card. And I was like, well, that's what we have.
Yeah.
That's what we have, literally. And so when I became a citizen, I'm like, now I'm an equal with everyone that I went to school with, my friends. And now I can vote.
Yeah.
But it meant everything because now I actually belonged to the country that I love and was raised in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So your journey now from this age forward, it's much different than your dad. And
Definitely.
It's kind of a testament of creating generational change.
Yes.
Right. Breaking a generational cycle and taking, and now here we are. So you go to school.
Go to school.
Go to high school.
High school.
Go to college.
Went to college at Stephen F. Austin.
When did you start working?
Go Jacks.
Yeah. What was your entry into the work life?
Yeah, so really started. Dad was really big on education.
Okay.
He only had
obviously
only had third grade education,
Yeah.
so for him, college was a big deal. And so,
Would you even dream of going to college in El Salvador?
no,
I mean, it's like, where would you even go?
no, for someone, a laborer like him,
Yeah,
it's
it's just not going to happen.
no, it's not going to happen.
Not even
There's not even
possible.
a GED, for you to go get because he didn't graduate high school. And so for him, he always planned the idea for me. Once I started having friends that I'd go to sleepovers and hang out with, he told me, he said, son, he said, I want you to be intentional about your time with these people. And I didn't understand what he meant. And then he told me, he said, if you want to go to college, which you're going to college, you've got to learn from other people that have gone to college, what that's like, what that process is like, what you need to work on. And he said, when you're around those families, talk to the parents and ask them, did you go to college? What did it take to do that? He said, if you want to do something, he said, I've taken you as far as I can.
I got you here. Yeah.
But I can't take you there. So you've got to put people in your life and ask them and talk to them and find out, learn from them how to get to the next level.
Yeah. Does that stay with you through life though?
It has.
For everything?
It's definitely, I took advantage of the opportunities of being around people. And even though, I wasn't the most mature kid, I definitely learned, if somebody was doing something that my parents never could do, then I would ask them questions. I would take that to the next level. And then once I started working, I didn't want to work retail or work in food service. So I went in and started working for the barbecue place.
Okay.
Sadler's.
Where your dad?
Yeah, working at the same place as my dad. So he set me up in a different department than his. And so my first job was in the boxing line.
Okay.
And so
this is a big, when you think barbecue place, like going to the barbecue restaurant downtown. No, this is like a commercial barbecue manufacturer, basically.
Manufacturer,
right?
yeah. So my dad watched it go from 2,500 square feet to 400,000 square feet.
Wow.
And so he was a part of that process, becoming the pit master and having success with that all the way up to this point. It's the company's growing and the manufacturer, they supply grocery stores, they supply restaurants. So it was a big operation. So I'm in this boxing line and, it's 40 degrees in the room. So it's cold. So you have to, dress appropriately.
Yeah.
And I stood there for 6 hours making boxes and then filling them with product and then sitting them down a machine that finishes taping them up, labels them, and then somebody else takes it and puts it on a pallet.
So
and
it's really exciting.
It's invigorating. So I went home that evening and Dad, he's asking me how it went, how I liked it. I said, I can't do this anymore.
After one day,
I said, I can't do anything. And I just told you guys, I don't have any quit in me.
Yeah.
But I told him, I said, I need to do something that stimulates me, where I'm a little more active. It's not for me. Sorry, I have ADD. So, I can't just stand there in one spot. And so he said, all right. He said, tomorrow I'll have them transfer you to my department.
Okay.
But he said, it comes with a condition. When you're at work, you're not my son. I'm not treating you like my son. So the rules are different. And I told him, I said, I'm 100% fine with that. I just don't want to be in that boxing line anymore.
Yeah.
And so I did. I showed up the next day, learned the process, got to see the operation, that he's been running. So he watched it go from 1 or 2 pits to now 30 pits that hold over 5,000 pounds of brisket each.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're capable of smoking 150,000 pounds of brisket a day.
Okay. That's a big operation.
Definitely.
And
100%.
I mean, so when you're doing that now and you're working for your dad, who's your boss, not your dad,
yeah.
you know, was there any moment or anything that happened that, you know, kind of, I don't know, made that connection, or, you know, just taught you some more on the work ethic side? Or
yeah, I mean, he was always giving me lessons. He was always, you know, pouring into me and helping me understand, you know, from his perspective, because he's in management. You know, he's the pit master, but he's the highest level manager overseeing all the cooking operation. And there was one day that still stands out above all the other days that I had working there. And, you know, I always saw myself as an equal to them. I'm 18, 19 years old.
And equal to all the people that are
all the people that work in that department. You know, I'm one of them.
Well, there's probably the people that are working there probably have a very similar background to your dad.
Yes.
Right. Maybe had arrived in this country, you know, through different avenues or trying to start a better life. But this is the kind of work that they can get.
It's the best work they can get. And at that company, it's the most hourly wage you can get.
Yeah.
So everybody wants in there because, you know, you're able to save a little more.
Yeah.
And so I'm working, and so these pits, they're like a Ferris wheel.
Okay.
And it's turning. So that way it's not just stable. They're in the smoke. The brisket's in the smoke and then in the heat. So anyway, it's just part of the smoking process. And so every now and then they get jammed up.
The little wheels.
So yeah. It'll get off kilter and it gets jammed, and then it won't turn. So when it doesn't turn, now you're risking burning product. Now you're risking losing 5,000 pounds of meat that you've invested all this time and money in. And so what we would do is, you know, I don't want to get into like OSHA rules or anything, but we would wrap chains around to stabilize it. And then you would when you load it one level at a time. Each of those baskets had 6 levels.
Okay.
And so you load one level at a time to keep it balanced. Right. You don't want to get.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so with it holding 5,000 pounds and jammed, now you have to unload it a full basket at a time. So not only is it not moving, but now you're creating a situation where it's completely off balance.
Yeah.
You've got 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of brisket hanging, and someone has to climb inside of it to get the other product off. And so, you know, I told you, I'm just a guy that's working in the department. I'm equal to everybody else. So I climb in the pit and I'm helping get the product down. And my dad walks in and he calmly walks over and he said, "Hey son, I need to talk to you outside." So I was like, okay. And I even asked him, I was like, "Can I finish this before I come?" No. Just go ahead and come out. Somebody else can do that. Hey, you get in there and do that. So I go outside and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, the pit's jammed. We're trying to get it
working.
And he goes, "I know what you're doing." He goes, "But what are you doing?" And so I still don't understand him. 18, 19. I'm trying to prove that I'm tough and can do anything, bulletproof. And he says, "Son, if that chain slips or it breaks, you die."
Yeah.
And so I even argued. I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm an equal with everybody in there, and I don't want anybody to think I have special treatment or anything like that." And he said, "No." He said, "Listen, I'm not going to be the one that goes home and tells your mom why I let you die. That's not happening." And so he said, "You got to understand." He said, "You don't understand who you are." And I was like, "No, I know I'm your son, Dad." And he said, "That's not what I'm
Alfredo
talking
Gonzalez,
about." Yeah, I know who I am. I know I'm your son. And he said, "I'm not talking about you being my son." He said, "I'm talking about you're not an equal with anyone else in this room." He said, "You're gifted." And so I was like, "No, I'm literally not gifted. I'm maybe a little taller than everybody else in there, but I'm just one of them." And he said, "No." He said, name me one other person in that room that can speak English."
Wow.
And there was no one else. And he said, Name me one of those guys that has graduated high school. He said, none of them. He said, name me one of them that's going to go to college next year. And he said, you don't see it. He said, but you're special. You are not one of us. He said, we're at a point in our life where this is it for us. He said, coming in here and working every day, this is what we have to look forward to. He said, but for you, you have everything ahead of you. He said, you're bilingual. You belong to this country. You're a citizen of this country. You're going to college. You're going to make something of yourself. He said, but that doesn't happen if you die in the pit today.
Wow.
And he told me, he's like, stop trying to be one of them and start being who you were meant to be.
So that's got to be another one of those moments that just carries with you.
That moment right there is probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life, because from that point on, I've always had this feeling inside that I was destined for something greater. And no matter what position I've held, whether that's here or anywhere else, I've always felt like I'm destined for greatness.
Yeah. So from there, in that moment, and now you're like, okay, this is like what your dad had gone through to get you as a 1-year-old, take the next step in the river to, this is for you. This is for you to take them again, break that generation and set the next generation up. So you go to college. At some point you're working in sales for the barbecue place.
Yes.
Is that you driving around with some brisket in your trunk and
in a way, in a way. So I worked my way through. I worked at the company through college.
Yeah.
And once I graduated college, I kept moving up as I was in college, and so I actually started working on the management side of operations, and I got to see a lot of the management and the planning side.
Yeah.
And so I took those lessons, learned them, graduated from college. And then, of course, I told you this, I've always had that feeling like I'm going to be a millionaire one day. And so I'm going to college because that's going to help me get there.
Yeah.
And then you graduate college and you're like, well, I guess I need to take an entry-level position somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. That's how I'm going to start making my million. Right. And so, I went into the sales department, became a salesman for the barbecue place. And, I started working there. I was on the food service side, which is we supply distributors that take product to restaurants.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's the side I started learning. And so in a way, yeah, you're right. I had a cooler with brisket and different barbecue products in the back. And I had my sell sheets and everything and my MapQuest maps.
Yeah.
Like routes, 15 stops a day. And I would go to restaurants and I would meet with chefs or whoever was in charge of the kitchen, and I would present them the product. And so for me, I knew I could close a sale if I could get that brisket in their mouth. And so it didn't matter if it was morning, after lunch, evening, whatever. I was going to make a push to get the product, to get them to taste it, because the product sold itself.
Yeah, yeah. I just have this scenario in my head that I have to, it's like, I can just see Alfredo. You walk in and be like, you want some brisket? Some brisket right here? All right.
Yeah.
You want the lean or the moist cut? Which one do you want, right?
Come here. Yeah, I got some for you.
Yeah. Someone walks by, what is that smell? Oh, it's my brisket. You want
yeah. Yep.
So, sorry. So you're literally, and we know you got people here that, they're walking into, 80 businesses.
Yeah.
Trying to talk about life insurance. You're walking in saying, hey, can you eat some brisket?
Yeah.
Right.
Just try it.
Maybe that's a big sales tip. Have you thought about bringing brisket with you?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You guys get more referrals out of the brisket. Right? Yeah.
Who do you know that likes brisket?
Right. Exactly. So I worked in that department and I learned the food service side, started working with different brokers that helped push our product at the different distribution centers. And later on, I found out that the person that had been training me, he was reporting up that I wasn't ready to take on any real responsibility.
How'd that make you feel?
Well, in the moment, I felt betrayed because it was someone that I worked closely with, and I thought I had a good relationship with him. Yeah. But then I realized he was making sure that he kept his pocket full and didn't really care about mine. So he knew my background. He knew I grew up in the business. He knew my dad was there. So I had a story to tell. Like when I would step into those restaurants, I was dynamic. I had something to share. I grew up in this business. So it was like it was my business.
Yeah.
And so I was really good. I had a lot of success, but he used his influence to let the management team know that I wasn't ready to actually work on my own. And so, and what all that meant was I was actually helping create and grow sales for the distributions under him.
Yeah.
So he was making all the commissions for the sales that I was making.
Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that until, 3-4 years later, once they started seeing that, hey, you're pretty talented. You can do this at a higher level. And they were like, it's kind of odd that they kept telling us you couldn't do this. And so I started making the connection, that, okay, my first supervisor had held me back.
Wow. So where do you go from here? And what once you hear that, what do you do?
Yeah. So at that point, I sit down with my manager and we come up with a game plan he gave me a couple of bigger accounts and he said, show me what you can do with these. I started growing those. And then we came up with a game plan to put me into management that would get me into management. So I'm young, I'm mid-20s, and I'm seeing opportunity. And that's what I always want, opportunity. That's, we're hunger for that.
Sure.
And so through that process, he was grooming me to replace him.
Okay.
And so, which was great. I was grateful for that, except for the Sadlers a couple of years later had an opportunity to sell the company. And so now you have this holding company that comes in and brings in their management team,
their style.
Yeah. And so my boss gave a great review of me and they said, great. So we want to keep him exactly where he's at and we want to get rid of you. So they were like, so they wanted to bring somebody in that they knew to run that food service side. So I kept working under the new people. I was having to train them
on what it is,
on every product, everything.
Train your boss. Yeah. That's always fun. Yeah.
And so after about 6 months to a year, he said, hey, I want to bring in somebody that I know for your position. And so they moved me to the retail side, which was where you sell to grocery stores.
Okay.
So like Walmart, Sam's Club are some of the biggest customers for Sadler's. H-E-B.
Okay.
We supplied their brisket for a long time, and at that time as well. And so they bring us in, and so I had to learn the retail. So now I have to learn the whole new side.
Whole new thing.
Yeah.
Decision that was made that you were doing well, right? Yeah. And you're being recognized and you don't really have influence. And so things are kind of crazy and out of your control. And, at some point you were starting to think, hey, I think this is how we transition into Globe, right? Because you're like, I need a change.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to learn the new side of the business. That boss quits. Another boss comes in. I'm training them up. And I looked at my wife and like I said, I don't quit anything easy.
Yeah.
And I looked at my wife, said, Jenny, I can't do this anymore. I keep getting passed up. And I know I've got talent. And I know I'm destined for more. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's just not going to be here. My dad's been here for years at this point, and I guess it's just not for me. So I left that. A week later, I get a phone call. And it's somebody invited me to an interview.
Okay.
It's an opportunity for you to work for this Mexican food company out of Houston. So I go out and meet with the owner and we come to terms on salary, everything, what the opportunity looks like. And so I left Sadler's. I left the barbecue business.
Yeah. And so now you're working for the other place. But when do you make the decision? Because you're talking to, this is when you talk to your neighbor at some point, right? Isn't that how you got in the Globe?
Yeah. So I worked for the Mexican food place for 2 years. Almost to the number of the date. And they gave me opportunity, so I was grateful for that, but no one ever talked to me. So I ran the operation in Dallas. The owner's son ran the operation in Houston.
Okay.
And so
you're not gonna go up.
No. Yeah. But I felt equal because I'm, his son, me, we're running the operation. So I felt great about that. But after time, no one's talking to me. I'm doing my thing. Sales are increasing. I know it every day. I know what it looks like. But then at a certain point, you think, I'm not even being recognized for growing sales. No one's saying good job. No one is saying anything.
Yeah.
It's just a check shows up. I go do my thing, and that's the transaction. So for the second time in my life, I came home and I said, Jenny, I can't do this anymore. And I'm out mowing the yard. And one of my neighbors, Corey Jones, who's now a senior vice president here at Globe in marketing, he walks across the street. We've known each other a couple of years. And he's like, hey, you ever been to college? And I was like, hey, hello to you too.
That's a...
And I told him, I said, yeah. I said, I have a marketing degree. And he just looks at me and says, well, I work in the marketing department and we've got some openings. And he says, you might be a good fit. I think
just out of the blue?
Out of the blue.
Right?
Out of the blue.
Wow.
So I thought, okay. So we started talking, end up going across the street. So I leave my mower there, you know, go across the street.
Still running. You're getting PR'd, right?
Yeah, I'm getting PR'd.
Runs out of gas.
Yeah. So Jenny's like, where are you? I'm like, oh, I'm at Corey's house. We're sitting at the kitchen table. And so basically he's pre-interviewing me.
Yeah.
And we're talking about like what it takes to do what he does in the department that he came from. And so he said, I think you should put together a resume and send it in. And so I did. And within a few days, I get a phone call for an interview that was set up with Jason Harvey, who's now the president of the direct-to-consumer distribution channel for Globe. And he brought me in. We interviewed. We hit it off, had a good interview. And so they ended up hiring me. And so for the first 2 years, I'm working in the direct-to-consumer side, which is the mailings. You know, we talk about Globe Life sends mailings out nationwide. And so I did that for 2 years. I oversaw about 200 million pieces of mail that went out.
Wow.
And that's the Globe sales side. So Corey hires me in, and then he leaves me like 2 months in because he had closed the deal for Globe Life Field.
The Texas Rangers.
I mean, I'm sorry, Globe Life Park.
Yeah,
the original park. And so he moved to our marketing department at Globe, where he then starts the sports marketing department.
Okay.
So I come up under Chris Lindsay, who helped me out, taught me a lot about the business and management. And for the first time in my life, I was actually managing people.
Wow.
Before it was just managing brokers, so contractors.
Yeah.
So I didn't have direct interaction with a downline. And so I learned that there. A couple years later, Corey gets promoted to become the senior vice president that he is now. And he comes to me and said, hey, I think you should apply for the sports marketing position. So I think you'd be a good fit. So I applied for it, interviewed, got that. So Corey's been the only person in my life that's hired me twice. Yeah.
This time there wasn't a lawnmower running.
No lawnmower. It was more professional, definitely. Yeah. But
but just we pause there though when you think about it, especially for the people here. When you never know what somebody's going through in their life. And, if you've got a great opportunity that could make an impact to somebody, it's almost doing a disservice not sharing it or not just stopping to say, hey, what are you keeping your options open? What are you looking for? Because, there's really just that moment that for some, do you ever ask Corey, he's like, why did you walk over and talk to me?
So he knew they were creating a couple more positions in that department, the direct-to-consumer department.
Okay.
And there were some openings coming up. He knew that because he was managing the department.
Yeah.
And so that's why he saw.
He just thought, hey, you might be somebody.
He's like, he'd be a good fit here.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, and I share this with people. I was sold on coming to work for Globe Life well before that conversation ever happened.
Why?
Because Corey always talked about where he started, when he started, where his family was, now where it is. I was seeing growth for him. And I thought, man, look, I'm at this cheese place where no one's talking to me.
Yeah.
And he's over here talking about having the greatest time of his life working at Globe Life. And so I told myself, I said, if I ever get a chance to get an interview at Globe Life, I'm in.
Wow.
So the fact that Jason brought me in, if he gave me the offer, I was in.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've had a lot of different positions. You start kind of entry level in a way, right? Just managing mailings. You move over into sports marketing. We at one point decided we wanted to sponsor NASCAR for Liberty National specifically. You had a big part in that. That's when we started interacting.
That's where I met you.
Right? Yeah. The NASCAR days were a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
We had a lot of good times.
A lot of stories from those days.
A lot of stories that we won't do on the podcast.
Right.
We have actually done a lap at a NASCAR track in a golf cart.
In golf carts.
Yeah, during a rain delay.
We didn't realize we were racing, but those fans wanted us to race.
Yeah, we didn't realize we were going to be on the track either until we ended up taking a wrong turn. You can do that at a NASCAR race. You have a golf cart.
It just happened.
You can make a wrong turn and be on the track.
And we were just like, all right, we're here. So let's make the lap. Yeah.
So, but through all these positions, and that's where I kind of saw that work ethic and how well you managed that program, because there was a lot of moving parts to that.
Yeah.
That gets you as a director, eventually promoted to senior director. Now you're running these academies with, thousands of people coming in, making sure the curriculum, is there anything that you can reflect back on from the moment you walked into this building to where you are today and where you're going, that you can say, hey, these are one or two of the few things that I always try to focus on that's instrumental in your ability to move up?
Yeah. So for me, I'm a relationship person.
Okay.
And for me, it was the relationships. So being in sports marketing gets you exposure to a lot of executives. And, when there's that separation between entry level and executive.
Yeah.
But the more time I spent around, Gary Coleman, Larry Hutchison, who are the former co-CEOs of Globe Life, and then spending time with you and Steve DiChiaro, our CEO, I started to realize I'm no different than them.
Yeah.
They just make higher profile decisions that are critical for the company every day, where I'm deciding, are we doing red shirts or blue shirts for this give out, for these handouts, but it's still a decision.
Yeah.
You have the same amount of time I have. And so I started to realize the more time that I spent with you, specifically, I started to realize I could do this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not
that special.
No, it's not even that.
More times. Wow. No, I'm just kidding.
But no, I mean.
But it's true.
But you and Steve specifically spent time with me. And I realized that the time that you spent with me, there were lessons to be learned, and I learned them.
Yeah.
I didn't just sit back and show up at the whatever race we were at and just
check the box of your
check
job.
The box and just kind of sit back and think, oh, I wonder what we're having for dinner or whatever. No, I was listening to you. I was listening to you, how you talk to people, how you pour into people. And I started thinking, well, I could do that too.
Yeah.
I actually started doing that at the different contests that we would run, the different racetracks and opportunities to engage with people. I just started doing what you did.
Yeah.
And whether you realize it or not.
Sure.
But for me, I was like, I want to be a part of the team. Yeah. I don't ever want to feel excluded. And so for me, it was important to connect with people, to connect with our agency owners that, I established some really good relationships at that time, never thinking that I was going to be working with them at Liberty National one day.
Well, and that was a huge part in your transition too. And I think it's all about taking advantage of the situation that you're in and seeing it differently. Like, some people may say, hey, I've got to work with the president or the CEO, and that's really high profile, and that's kind of scary. I don't know what's going to happen. That's a hard interaction, very high stakes.
Yeah.
And I want to limit my exposure and try to get in and get out, which is fine. Some people approach it that way. It's limiting. And you took it the other way and said, hey, I now have, yes, I'm interacting based on NASCAR. We would go sit in a meeting and you were like, here's our itinerary for the weekend.
Yeah.
We're going to go here. We're going to do this. You're going to be there. He's going to be there. We're going to, and here's the color shirts we're wearing. And you say that, but like, these things are important.
Yeah. No, definitely.
But then you took it as, now I need to use this opportunity with these people. This is the circle I want to be in.
Yes.
Now I've got access to it. I'm gonna try to get as much from it as I can.
Yeah, I wanted sometimes I would just create a meeting with you guys to have more exposure with you.
Yeah.
Because there was never a meeting where I didn't have some kind of takeaway.
Yeah.
Where I thought, okay, that just opened my mind to something else.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be great. Like I told you, from the time my dad had that chat with me, I wanted to be great, and I wanted to showcase it. And then Globe Life gave me an opportunity to find a way there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a lesson in there. Just if you have exposure to people, find other ways to pull from that. I remember traveling when I was a trainer, basically, and sitting in agency meetings, and it had nothing to do with what I was there, but I wanted to see how these top owners led their teams, because one day that's gonna be something I need.
100%.
So
yeah, it was the same way. Every meeting that I ever went to, every sports marketing opportunity I went to, I wanted to learn lessons that taught me how to be a better person, better leader, to someday hopefully get me in a position to showcase that.
Right. Well, and so we kind of joked a minute ago, but I mean, you saw after doing that, the reality is like there's nothing special.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I've been here for a period of time and have lessons to pull back on, to use in decision making and direction of the company and relationship building and all that. But we're no different. I feel like I'm an SA in this room right now because I was an SA in this room, and I can draw on that.
Right.
And so that probably helped you also have some confidence that, hey, I can move up. I can do this. If I can be like that, I can be around them. I can do that. I can be that.
Yes. I saw, I learned the lesson. There's a lot of things that I use now, being a director, being a senior director, that are lessons that came when I was in sports marketing and just around you.
Yeah.
I learned ways that you talk to people, ways that you encourage people, ways to help people overcome whatever they're struggling with. And those things stuck with me.
Yeah.
And now I use them. Yeah. I used them then. I applied them to where I could in the department I was in, but I definitely use them now working with our field force. And, I'm grateful that you all were not afraid to be transparent around me, because I've learned so much just from being around you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You hang out with greatness, some of it's going to rub off on you,
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that's important here is just, and, again, I'm trying to pull out for listeners, is that when the decision was made that we're going to promote you, we actually stole you from the marketing department, right?
Yep.
We recruited you. You didn't apply for that position. There wasn't a job ad out saying, hey, we're looking for sales directors. What had happened is, over the years of interacting with you in NASCAR, and we kind of knew that sun was going to set, right? Globe Life, we're going to go with the one brand strategy.
Right.
Globe Life Field's coming. Talk about the Cowboys, now the Lakers, FC Dallas, all these things. So NASCAR is probably going to slow down a little bit. What you had done up until that point created this marquee.
Yes.
And you had prepared yourself for an opportunity that you didn't even know was going to be there. But once the opportunity was there, you'd already done the work. So it was, hey, I think we need to bring Alfredo over on the sales side.
Yeah, I could step into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I had success in sports marketing, and I'm grateful to everyone that poured into me in that department. But we had our greatest year when we signed Globe Life Field. Mm-hmm. We agreed to do that. We later signed the Cowboys, closed on the Cowboys deal. And so I thought, all right, maybe I can get promoted out of this. Like, I just had like a signature year for anyone in sports marketing, and maybe I can get to the next level now. And when I met, they told me, they were like, well, it doesn't work like that in marketing. Sometimes you just got to wait your turn.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'm not patient. So I thought about being in that boxing line and, telling my dad, I gotta go.
Or working for the, the other company, and, it's the son and the father, and you're here in Dallas.
Yeah, exactly. And so, at that point, I made the decision that if the opportunity came, I was open to moving. And
this is kind of like Corey walking across the street talking to you. Like, it's weird how that timing happened, because I didn't know any of that had occurred.
Yeah.
I knew that sports marketing was changing.
Yes.
And I knew that we wanted to add directors. And so it just made sense to say, hey, you know what? We need to Really, I wanted to grab you before you started moving up over there.
Yeah, exactly. And you
Get
did.
you while I could.
And you did. I actually had Matt Darden call me to his office.
Okay.
And he sat me down. He said, hey, you know what? We had just finished closing the Cowboy deal. And there's a lot of details there where, I had some interactions with him. Mm-hmm. And I think I was influential in that, in making that happen. And so he sat me down. He said, I'm sorry I've never talked to you about this, but what do you want out of your career? And so for me, I was like, here's the spotlight, right? It's here.
This is the CEO of Globe Life asking you that question.
Yeah. And so I told him, I said, look, I want to give Globe Life everything I got. I don't want to be the sports marketing guy. I don't want to be the direct to consumer guy. I don't want to be labeled as he's the best at this. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he said, you could stay in the sports marketing position for the rest of your life. We have the Globe Life Field deal with the Rangers through
187 years,
Yeah, so he's like, that takes you probably through retirement.
Yeah.
So you can keep doing this. And I said, no. I see better. I just feel like I can do better for the company. And he told me, he said, I'm glad you said that. He said, if you'd be open to a move to the sales side, your career will blossom. You'll never look back.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to be, I'm open for that because at the end of my career, when I retire, I want them to say, that's Alfredo Gonzalez. He's a Globe guy. He gave Globe Life everything he had, no matter what department he was in. Yeah. And so Matt called me later that after. He said, we don't have any openings right now, but he called me later that afternoon and said, Steve Bicciaro wants to meet with you. And so Steve sat me down, explained to me what the opportunity was at Liberty National. I told him I'd take the weekend and think about it, which I was already leaning that way. I mean, I was in, but I just wanted
a little takeaway.
Yeah. And then Steve, it was funny. Steve was texting me throughout the weekend, and I was like, hey man, I'm having to talk to my wife and, explain to her there's travel involved. So I don't want to just say yes.
Sure.
I want to, really want to be thoughtful about it. And then I came back Monday morning, my phone rings at 8:05. It's Sally. And she's like, Steve wants you to come up here and talk to him. And so at that point I was like, yeah, I'm in, Steve.
Awesome.
So we worked out the details for my transition, and Matt was right. I've never looked back.
Yeah. And so this was 2019, right?
2019.
And so we put you in a training program, and you're leaning on interactions that you've seen. You've made relationships with agency owners.
Yes.
And we put you through a regular training program, and you're really excited to get out there, travel, be in the field. And we released you from training like March of 2020.
Yes.
And then like a week later, everything shuts down.
Everything shuts down.
So you're the only director that we've ever trained that didn't travel for the first year of being a director.
Yeah. I was the COVID director.
So we trained you how to do it in person, and now we're going to do it Zoom and figure it out, because I don't know what we're doing either. And we're going to do this together.
So I remember thinking that week before I took a region.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder what's going to happen. Like, I know that this is the date that we've been working towards, but now things are shutting down. I don't know if we're getting furloughed or fired or what's going to happen with us. And so I just started thinking, I was like, I don't know. There's so many unknowns here. But then,
so how'd you navigate that? How'd you get through it?
So I started drawing back on the conversations I'd had with you, with Steve, with Gary and Larry at the time, who were still the co-CEOs at the time. And I remember the director team, we'd get together on Zoom and we would have just conversations, just kind of encouraging each other through that time and trying to help each other figure out, like, how do we move forward? And the question was like, what's going to happen to us? And so I remember sitting there and, I'm the new guy, but I'm not the new guy.
Yeah.
I'm new to Liberty, but I'm not new to Globe.
Yeah.
And so I told them, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to tell y'all something and take it for what it's worth, because I know I'm the new guy. But I've been around Gary, I've been around Larry, I've been around Matt, Steve now, and Mike. They're not letting us go. I said, Globe Life has invested too much in us to this point to just let us go.
Yeah.
I said, because when the world comes out of this, we're going to move forward. Like, I don't know when that is or what that looks like, but we're going to move forward, and they're going to need good people, and we're those good people. And I'm telling you, I've had enough conversations that can draw on that confidence. And I think 2 days later, there was a Zoom meeting with the co-CEOs, and they said, no one's getting furloughed. No one's getting fired. No one's losing their job. And so that was encouraging.
No layoffs during
No layoffs.
COVID. Not a lot of companies did that.
And then you called me on April 1st and you said, this is not an April Fool's joke. I'm assigning you these agencies under your care. And I know we're not traveling, but we got to do our best by them.
Yeah.
And so I did. I picked up the phone, and I remember 18-hour days just on the phone encouraging people. It was a hard time because we didn't have a virtual platform at the time.
Right.
And then 7 days later we did. And it was a lot of just talking people through it, helping them overcome their fears. Even though I have my own fears, but when you're a leader, you got to put your fears aside and lead your people.
I think that's you're leaning into your relationship building.
Yeah.
And the relationships you had built
Yes.
are now paying dividends. So again, here's a storm that was completely unforeseen, and you had been working to put yourself in position to endure that
Yes.
for years and didn't even realize
Didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, because I took advantage of my time in sports marketing, being exposed to the agency owners, I had a relationship that pre-existed me being their director.
Yeah.
And so when I picked up the phone and said, hey, Vicki Ketron, like, here's what you got to do, girl. I know this is hard, and here's where we're going. And she'll tell you to this day, we had a great relationship, but she was like, I know who you are because you walked me through some of the darkest times that we've had.
Yeah.
And, I had relationships already with everyone that was in my region. And so, that just goes back to tell you that lesson of take advantage of your time. Be intentional about your time with people because you never know when you're going to be working with them.
Yeah. It's almost like the whole company was standing in the river.
Yeah. Take the next step.
Right. Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, and that's really what it was because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And build those relationships, take the next step.
I see that scene in my mind, but I wish I was old enough to remember what that sounded like.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful I don't because I'm sure it would be traumatic as a child to remember that. Sorry, my sister, she still remembers all that.
Yeah, I bet. That's challenging. So, well, Alfredo, an amazing story, a fantastic journey. Thank you so much for sharing that and putting that out there for everybody. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So we're not done yet. There's one thing left.
Okay.
As you know, part of our tradition on the Level Up Lifestyle is all guests receive not only round trip transportation to and from McKinney, Texas.
Woo.
You also get a bobblehead.
Let's go.
Right. And so I'm so happy. This is the last Leadership Academy under your reign.
Yeah.
That's probably not the right word
my
for
care,
it, but under your care,
yeah.
right? Roger Jones is taking over, and we know he's going to do a great job.
So
on the last day of your last Leadership Academy, I'm going to present you your official Level Up Lifestyle bobblehead.
All right.
And here he is. There
All
you go.
Right. Yes. That is awesome. Yes. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one.
That's pretty good.
That's one of our better bobbleheads.
I like this. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Nice thick hair.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure.
I love it.
So if I kind of want to ask this two ways. If the bobblehead kind of represents who you have become. Maybe if you could go back to that 18-year-old kid before your dad had that conversation, maybe you could go back to El Salvador when your parents are trying to decide what to do, knowing who you've become now. What would you tell yourself back then? Or what would you tell them back then?
So I thought about it the same way that you're thinking about it, two ways.
Yeah.
To myself, I would just say, you know what? You're right. You're right. You're destined for something great, but you got to go out and find it. And you did. And you're still doing that. And the thing is, just enjoy the moment and have more confidence in yourself through that journey. Because it's been a journey, and it's a journey that I love.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it. And to my parents, just grateful for their sacrifice.
Yeah.
That they made a decision to change who we are and who we became and who we're becoming. And they very easily could have just stayed where they were. And so I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for all the lessons that they gave me throughout the years. And, to Dad, he's been so instrumental in my life. So I love you guys. And I want you to know that. I want you to know that, I hope I've made you proud.
It was worth it. It was worth it.
That's it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Alfredo.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has inspired you on your path to success. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. See you soon on the Level Up Lifestyle Podcast.